everyone's well this morning.
How are you?
And pretty good. No complaints. No complaints. Well, today we're going to begin the regular lecture here. Beginning in the book, Arkansas American History, Chapter 1. Essentially the prehistory. One thing I noticed about this class is there's seemingly a new handout every day. Lots of interesting handouts, articles, maps, so forth to kind of illustrate what's going on here. Today will certainly be no exception. Today, the little handouts here. One is an appendix from an old Arkansas history textbook for the high schools. Is on the counties, the names when they're established and what they're named for. Front and back for all 75 Arkansas counties. The names for various politicians, various state figures, national figures. That's probably in Jackson County, also named after Andrew Jackson. Lincoln County after Abraham Lincoln. Union County is honoring the Union of American States. Union County being one of the oldest counties in the state. And some of these maps we're handing out, of course, will have a completely skewed perspective of what these counties should be today. County borders twisted, not out of the borders they are now. I'll support later on will be somewhat interesting. List of the governors and U.S. senators of Arkansas. 2 sheets here. Of course, obviously, there are no elected governors in Arkansas until the 19th century, when we look at some period well before that. So we'll give it to you now. And finally, our third handout, we just get started off here, is a copy of an excerpt from an article in the Arkansas Times. Is on the different major periods of Native American activity the period before Columbus arrived. This front and back side, kind of interesting. A very kind of a loose summary here. That's very handy, I think. I've said that historians divide the history of the New World between that period before Columbus, the Precolumbian era, and everything after Columbus. Because in spite of some of the advances of many Native American civilizations, particularly the Mayans and Aztecs of Central America, very mathematically advanced societies, no Native American society ever built a written language, so there is no written history of the New World before the Europeans arrived. And there's certainly history, but they never had an alphabet they could actually write anything down, but everything is passed down by the oral tradition. Is stories passed down from one generation to the next. And then some civilizations, particularly the Mayans, had kind of a hieroglyphic system basically pictures, and seeing how alphabets evolve, an alphabet would have been the next step, but the Mayans just something never got to that point. Some civilizations took out the Cherokees and adapted the English alphabet, later adapted English alphabet for use for their own language, but again, none of them developed an alphabet strictly on their own. Now, as we we can tell about Arkansas, it's been inhabited by human beings for about 12,000 years. Here on page 1, chapter 1 here, see a topographic map of the state. Now, the earliest theories how human beings have arrived in the New World have to do with the Bering land surveys, the Bering theory. It's come from the idea that climate is not a constant. There are a lot of subtle shifts in climate over time, which have dramatic impacts on civilization. For example, one of the most intriguing finds in the Sahara Desert.
I found a set of keys that belong to anybody. It's not. Sorry about that.
That's all right. What do you think was the most astounding finds by archaeologists in the Sahara Desert several years ago? Fishing equipment. Well, the driest areas in the world 5,000 to 10,000 years ago was a rolling grassy plain. Lakes and ponds people went fishing in, but because of climate change over time, process what they call desertification emerged, and the Sahara today is a desert. People left their fishing equipment behind. Giving us evidence that yes, there was fishing done there at one time. And two particular points between 40 and 50,000 years ago. Now, archaeologists use DP to indicate before present. Dealing with dates BC, they use it simply as an easier shorthand, so it has to subtract 2,000 years, convert from AD to BC, back and forth again. And since there are no written records, these dates are just kind of estimates, educated guesses based on findings, carbon-14 dating artifacts, and other dating techniques are determined roughly when these events occur, give or take a few years, a few hundred years in some cases, to go further back. And the second period between 18,000 and 16,000 years ago. Ice ages had cooled the Earth, the temperature of the Earth so much where glaciers advanced far to the south, upper Canada. In fact, the Cape Cod of Massachusetts was formed from a glacial expansion. These glaciers had expanded far enough, basically they soaked up all the enough ocean water, the ocean levels dropped. And this area here between, let's say for last, it's Alaska, and Russia, it's actually about 12 miles, kind of a shallow sea, came to shallow enough where after it was dry land, and people were able to cross. Now, the previous series indicated that's probably the largest period of migration between 18,000 and 16,000 years ago, but more recent findings, particularly in some areas of North Carolina, indicate that there was considerable migration in the second period between 40 and 50,000 years ago. It migrated from Asia to America. But we only have evidence of habitation in Arkansas dating back 12,000 years. Does that mean nobody was here? Well, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. We just don't know. The evidence we have dates back to 12,000 years. And for there any written records, people have to rely on information on archaeology. Essentially, they're historians who study the past with our no records to study. combination of history and forensic science. This is basically trying to determine who these people were from the artifacts they leave behind. And the artifacts they leave behind is essentially trash. We're basically digging through people's trash from 10,000 years ago. They leave behind old fishing hooks, old tools that are worn out, they can't use anymore. They have to leave behind in a hurry for some reason. Old potteries and broken pottery. But from that, we're able to determine a great deal about how people lived. These dates here, 40,000 years, 60,000 years ago, Paleo-Indian period, Dalton period, these aren't just names archaeologists made up just so you could publish a nice article in one of the trade journals. This has been confirmed and studied and peer-reviewed thoroughly for decades. Mountains and mountains of evidence. In fact, what we read in the papers about interesting discovery in Arkansas, South Carolina, Alaska, wherever else, that's just one example we've heard of from the hundreds, even thousands of excavations that take place around the world, even just in the United States. In fact, there are some museums somewhere that's full of such so many artifacts we could never dig through them all in our lifetime. Now, once people started coming to Arkansas about 10,000 BC or so, Arkansas was then as much as it is now. Rural, people relying on hunting and fishing. Things really haven't changed a whole lot in many respects. But the type of hunting was much different from what it is today. Deer hunting and hunting for ducks and whatever else was much different. They at that time hunted woolly mammoths and mastodons. Now, these creatures are both extinct today, but essentially a woolly mammoth and a mastodon, they're basically two different species of elephant. Elephant hunting in Arkansas. I don't mean it's Little Rock Zoo even. Again, from the artifacts and camps that people left behind, you can tell that because primitive tools and the remains of these animals they've been able to find and tucked away in caves, abandoned campsites. We're able to tell these fairly closely. And so throughout this entire area, basically west of the Mississippi River, north Louisiana, Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, very distinct developments are taking place in this period called the Paleo-Indian period. Yeah, very small tribes, maybe only a few dozen people wandering back and forth across an area. So limited contact with other groups because population really is still very, very low. So these tribes are a little more this kind of extended families. No real formal kind of organization we can tell in this early period. But during this period of a Paleo-Indian period, we can tell that a lot of people in Arkansas, those people who did live in Arkansas, were able to find just enough food, enough of a stable food supply of one localized area. They were able to stay in one area for an extended period of time. Because until this point here, people lived very much a kind of hand-to-mouth existence. existence we call hunter-gatherer societies. Hunter-gatherer societies, they hunt, gather, forage for food, whatever they can find, and just live off that. Where they lived was based entirely on the idea of whether they could actually find food to eat. Survival was first and only priority. And again, 10, 12,000 years later, our society kind of based on the same thing. We live in large cities because we have a stable food supply. In fact, our society is so advanced and prosperous compared to this one that we don't even think about food supply. Groceries doesn't have what we want, we'll go down to Walmart. We have such a diverse, a society with such a diverse division of labor that there are specific people, specific tasks they do. They take care of the food supply in our society. Others attend to other projects. That's part of our civilization, the stable food supply, allowing us to live in one period for an extended period of time, our whole lives we wanted to. These people, Paleo Indians, might live in one area for a couple of years or so, if they're lucky. Sometimes it might be for a few months. Food supply gets kind of scarce, but they have to move to where the food supply is very often. The next major period is called the Dalton period. This period about 8,500 to 7,500 BC. Total population of the states maybe about 300. What we can tell from our evidence, there were maybe about 300 people in the state at this time. And this whole period is named for something called the Dalton Point. A lot of these particular time periods are named by the archaeologists who make a major discovery in this period, that there's some advance in technology that produces some kind of change, distinct change in the society. In this case, the Dalton Point, a particular type of spear that is being used much more prominently during this time period. The Dalton points we use as knives and saws. We actually find evidence of substantial cemeteries in many areas. People were burying their dead in the very elaborate rituals, much as we do today, concerning the dead. Now, one of the tools that archaeologists use, may seem what kind of unsavory in our modern society, but is actually, these cemeteries are actually a very valuable source of information for archaeologists. I don't say they start digging up cemeteries today, but thousands of years in the past, they will find a lot of very helpful information about these civilizations, the kind of care they used before the dead, tell a lot about their religious ideas, the kind of care they had in preparing the dead. They wrap the body in some kind of shroud, they just throw them into the ground, just leave them out, what they do. Sometimes these people are buried with tools, which they were able to determine that people were using stone tools at a particular variety of the time period. As the body decays, you're able to measure radioactive isotopes left behind, carbon-14 dating, to determine just when these people were buried. Sometimes clutching a favorite tool, whatever from their lifetime, we're able to determine that, okay, this particular type of point, this particular type of tool was used very widely during this time period. Much as our own society, sometimes people are buried with a favorite object from this life. Sometimes a wedding ring, or dressed with a very fancy suit, or there's one man I remember a few years ago on TV, making elaborate plans to be buried in his favorite car. Can you imagine 10,000 years from now, what archaeologists are going to have to say about that? These people were nuts. But it's because these grave goods, as archaeologists call them, it's rather determined that some rock with a chipped end on it was actually being used as a tool, rather than just some broken piece of rock, sometimes indistinguishable from the surrounding rock. Now, throughout this entire area, we see evidence of a mammoth and mastodon hunting in southern Missouri, eastern Oklahoma. So the mastodon itself, we believe, became extinct about 8,000 BC. We can't find any kind of evidence of the mastodon existing beyond that point. In fact, there are only just a handful of species of elephants left today, primarily in Africa and in Asia. Now, what we can determine is during this entire early period, most of the developments we're able to find are all along the Mississippi River. See here on the map on page 1. Even though there is evidence there is activity from a different state, most of the longest lasting and most extensive development is along the Mississippi River. So then, much as now, the Mississippi River was an important avenue for local economies. Fish available very plentifully. Mississippi River, if used kind of primitive rafts, but in later periods, used to travel up and down the river very quickly to communicate with other tribes. In fact, we get toward the first millennium BC and first millennium AD, Mississippi River was the heart of major trading networks, had connections throughout North America, from New York to Montana, from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf of Mexico. But in this early period, most of these tribes still kept staying very localized to one specific area. But even so, this early period here, life is still very difficult. Food supply is not always entirely stable. The climate is still very cool. So a cool climate combined with the overhunting was believed to be the primary reason for the extinction of the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. Look here in your book here, start seeing examples of how some of these technologies starting to develop. Paleo-Indian spear points. As you can see, these kind of jagged edges makes little chunks of rock, kind of softer rock. They're able to use harder rocks to kind of pound out little pieces and use it into somewhat of aerodynamic, sharp design to be used for throwing it to wild game or used for cutting later on. I remember some of my students saying that for years they'd go in the backyard in some of the more rural parts of southern Arkansas and pick up a handful of arrowheads and spear points. South Arkansas always had a considerable amount of activity. How do these people live? They just live outside or in caves, especially to get into the areas closer to the Mississippi River. Find indication had these kind of temporary kind of lean-tos, kind of simple wood frame structures, bark, grass, or hides. So not like the teepees, the Plains Indian would use, but basically kind of crude wooden shelters using underbrush, whatever tools they had available to make temporary and sometimes very very sturdy structures. Sometimes we're able to find finely made bone needles. It is the bones of these animals are able to make needles to help kind of sew hides together. Sometimes finding evidence, even remains of hides used as clothing until they've been used as clothing of some type. Also remains of 10,000-year-old campfires. Now sometimes you're up in some of the caves, kind of a mile or so deep inside some of these caves, they'll actually find campfires that have been remains which are undisturbed for thousands of years. And we're able to determine that through radiocarbon dating. That is simply measuring the isotopes regular at decay regular as clockwork, which is how some of these finds actually are. As time went on, these societies became more stable and found more evidence of interaction with each other. They were able to leave a tribe for an extended period of time, go travel, sometimes barter, trade with other tribes, to communicate with them, going back and forth. And we're able to determine that because some of these later finds, I find evidence that their cultures that somehow wouldn't ordinarily mesh together, sometimes all found in one area. Evidence of animals and rocks and jewelry that should not be native to this area suddenly being found in this area. For example, they've been finding tools and jewelry made from a Rocky Mountain obsidian found in New York. A type of mineral would not be found anywhere else except in the Rocky Mountains. So they found 2,000 miles away, indicating that somebody picked it up and carried it over. And typically with pottery, especially get further in these periods, we're able to determine with pottery just a lot more about cultural beliefs, cultural values of these societies, and just what kind of interactions they're having with different societies. And pottery, you're thinking, well, there's only so many ways to make a pot, and well, it's any kind of random design would mean anything. I'll show you how it works. Take out a sheet of paper and draw a pot with a design on it. Any kind of pot with any kind of design on it. Don't worry, this isn't a grade. Now, just how some of these pots are made, sometimes we're able to tell us about the civilization, and sometimes they're more advanced techniques, sometimes these pots are very crude. But essentially, they're using the same functions they are now, essentially as Tupperware. Store food for extended periods of time, particularly grains, nuts, berries, fruits, whatever kind of vegetation they can find and live on. And sometimes the residue, some of this is left behind. Some of these pots were able to determine just what exactly these people ate at these particular times. All right, y'all done good and pass them up here. Don't worry, I'll keep you anonymous.
That's all. My sweet. I've been on a serious place this morning.
Okay. Now, just one of these I've seen, you can see all sorts of different shapes and different designs. So we have this design of stripes, different shapes. It's kind of interesting one here, kind of zigzag kind of shape, zigzag design on it. This one kind of a little spiral here, round bottom here. Another round bottom with different symbols here. This one, kind of shaped kind of like a vase, kind of a long neck and a short, steady body with little flowers around the end of it. This one has a nice little handle. It could be yours for $19.95. Spiral design, stripes on the side. A skillet. Fried fish. Again, kind of rounded to the short neck, but flower design, stripes across it. A flat bowl with a little smiley face on it. Some kind of a taller kind of pot, zigzag design, dots, and a little shading at the bottom. Now, what that shows is, consider we're all roughly from the same area, growing up in the same time period, same cultural influences, same general backgrounds, but notice the diversity of design we have in just our own class. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, you know in a society there'll be variations on design. But you take people from completely at random, who knows all these sorts of different possible shapes and designs, and all of a sudden, archaeologists are finding all these different designs, all these different shapes, all these different techniques of manufacturing pots. And it only means one thing, that they had to contact some kind of other culture that came in and brought an idea to the civilization, that some kind of design, some kind of symbol, and said, oh, this looks really neat, we're going to go ahead and put this on our designs now. As it happens, they're able to tell if there was some kind of contact between these different civilizations. Using civilization kind of a really broad sense here, but we're able to tell that all of a sudden, because there are these new ideas, new designs, new symbols, is important too. So a lot of work went in on some of this, and they're not going to put these designs down on their pottery unless it meant something to them. Because they thought it was something that looked really neat or had some kind of cultural significance. Now, say that meaning of these symbols in different societies may be different, but apparently in other societies impressed enough, they decided they're going to start using these designs to some extent. That's how we're able to kind of determine more about these different civilizations. Not just about what they're doing, but how they're doing it. And sometimes it says a lot about a civilization that they are using so many different designs. It says a lot that they're encouraging creativity. They aren't necessarily discouraging it. They're using that people have a very creative and artistic temperament. I mean, it's generally appreciated in that society. And we're able to tell that these societies are contacting each other. There's evidence of cooperation. Sometimes different societies or tribes of pulling together the resources to go on hunting expeditions, trading, and exchange of ideas. But again, this is a society where, these are societies where there is no written language. And everything that the next generation knows is what has been passed down from word of mouth from one generation to the next. Fathers teach their children how to hunt in particular ways, particular tools, all the different little tricks they picked up. These children teach their children teach their children, so on and so forth, beyond the generations. And over time, realizing the survival of their community and their families depended on it, a lot of these societies start developing very specific rituals, very specific ways they're going to go out hunting. One kind of basically for kind of superstitious reasons, that is, they're going to do it in a particular way because that's the way it's worked in the past. And certain rituals they perform before they go on their expeditions, kind of for good luck, to appease the gods they might believe in. And also to kind of get themselves in frame of mind, we have to do this a specific way. This is how our ancestors did it. This is how we were taught it. And this is what we must do to survive and pass it, and then pass this on to our next generation. It's a very elaborate rituals again developing around hunting. In fact, in an area called the Cooper site, northwest Oklahoma, early Paleo-Indian artifacts are associated with extensive deposits of bison bones and buffalo, presenting 3 hunting and butchering episodes. It is, and very specific, this particular society had very specific rituals for hunting and then for preparing the food afterward. In fact, one bison skull found among the remains of the first hunting episode provides intriguing evidence of the ritual preparation for a subsequent kill. And that skull red zigzag lines painted on the front of the bone. Heaven used appears to be hematite, or red ochre as it's often called. This was widely used by Paleo-Indians and other ancient Eurasian hunters for ritual purposes. This evidence suggests that Paleo-Indians in the Mid-South also attached religious principles to their hunting practices. And it's believed that a lot of societies believe there are spirits kind of guiding the hunt, controlling the animals. They need to kind of appease these spirits to be able to go on effective hunting. And using all sorts of these different paints and dyes, that kind of not only to decorate an animal hide, but sometimes decorate their own faces. War paint is kind of derisively referred to today, very kind of inaccurately, but always kind of decorating themselves for these particular religious rituals. Now, Dalton's sites, so this particular period, 8500 to 7500 BC, they're much more numerous. You can see a much wider range of habitat and resources. Again, a little bit more stability in the food supply. People are able to spread out a little bit more, try out different places they like, more or less. Sometimes they're more successful than others. By the end of this period, evidence that it may have been as many as 500 people in space. Again, not a large population, but enough that we are able to notice that they were here for an extended period of time. So there are different periods beyond that, different transitional periods we don't know a lot about. Sometimes it's centuries passing, there's no significant development in technology, or somehow it just seems to be kind of a gap in the record. And also we know they're here because suddenly people don't die, then suddenly 500 years later, people spring up again. This doesn't work like that. I mean, strange things happen in this world, but nothing strange like that. Between 7000 and 3000 BC, notice there was an extremely long drought period, causing a lot of changes in the societies of this area. Forests were dying out, regions became more grassland, and much drier kind of climate what we're used to today in Arkansas. Notice a lot of these hunter-gatherer tribes of this period, 7000, 3000 BC, archaeologists call the hypsothermal archaic period. Tend to be gravitating kind of more toward the upland, like the Ozarks, Washita Mountain region, kind of gravitating toward our region. And around 4500 BC, start seeing again more evidence of climate moistening, and people starting to spread out again. Again, where people are living determined explicitly on where they can find a stable food supply. Moving along a little further, kind of more interesting time periods, called the poverty point period. Generally dated from about 3000 to about 500 BC. Now, we start seeing the poverty point period as kind of a shift in hunting priorities, the more advances in fishing technology, and kind of a shift kind of back toward the Mississippi River region. Seeing bonefish hooks, notched pebble, basically people using rocks as weights for their lures. A lot of the use of societies relying on fish, shellfish, and turtles for nourishment. Bracelets and necklaces made out of various kinds of marine shells. And since some of these shells are not from areas that are native to Arkansas, we have evidence again that tourists have kind of trade and other societies going on up and down the Mississippi River. Deer are the primary target hunting activity. By this time, all the mastodons and mammoths have died off, so they're changing the priority and back toward deer, caribou in some areas, probably outside the state, but sometimes there's bear hunting, but primarily deer hunting. Actually, like with the mammoths and mastodons, the deer, a lot of these, the deer were used for just about everything. And dietary needs, plus antler, bone, hides, and hooves being used for various purposes. Antlers and bones being used to use that to make those into tools, hides for clothing. Hooves, particularly the buffalo hooves, you can see this in the later Plains Indian tribes, is you could actually boil hooves and use it to make glue out of kind of crude glue. In fact, a couple hundred years ago, that's how people made glue in European societies, out of horses. So you get the kind of crude joke at the racetrack about the slow horse glue maker. And you see foraging also for fruits, vegetables, nuts, and so forth. But what you also start seeing here at the poverty point period is large-scale habitations, large-scale development habitations. One of the most important sites is actually not too far from our own area. The area is called simply Poverty Point. It's in northeastern Louisiana, kind of east of Monroe. I sometimes see on TV advertised the Poverty Point trade days. And the major Poverty Point site dates from about 1200 BC. These are the earliest large-scale habitation taking place in the United States. Permanent structures, permanent communities, relying on the game and the fishing available, felt very stable, reasonably prosperous societies by their standards, and not very long-lasting. As they call poverty points because of the areas, just because of the area, but all the remains of poverty point civilization are still there to this day. You travel down I-20 about an hour east of Monroe, big exit to the poverty point site, right there. And you start seeing with these societies is that not only just these structures for people living in, but also the mound builder civilization starting to develop also. At the burial mounds, various types formed in different shapes. Snakes, poplar design, some of that was kind of bird design. Again, it's very crude. They did much better than I do, but these various burial mounds, sometimes houses kind of in and around them, trying to kind of care people had for the dead in that society. Again, not entirely different from our own society. And go here downtown, we have the old Presbyterian Cemetery. Small houses in that area. You go to some other parts of town, have a cemetery across the street from a housing development. People saying, "Look, God say wanting to live people kind of care for the dead, have this society of people living near cemeteries, living near places they bury the dead." It's not at all entirely unusual. Remember, our society is not so different from societies around the world, because people are, like I said, essentially the same world around. There's slightly different variations on what different societies do, slightly different approaches, slightly different priorities. But essentially you can see common elements of society, one society to the next very often. And in Poverty Point, 3,000 years ago, these are societies based on hunting, fishing, and trading area. Essentially, not a lot has changed. And what people in this part of it, what's some favorite pastimes of people in this area today? Hunting and fishing. And what do people like to do a lot of times? Go out shopping. And change it up, really. There weren't as many Walmarts in the Poverty Point period, but I'll see evidence of hunting smaller game like turkeys, possums, squirrels, and rabbits. And this particular Poverty Point site, we think at its height might have had as many as 5,000 people. At the particular Poverty Point site, see a very interesting design over here. Again, the succeeding page is seeing various of the dark points and various tools used. On page 8, see the main burial mound sites. Kind of central temple complex, radiating design outward. A lot of work, very elaborate work that went into this. And it's believed that the Poverty Point site might have been the center of a major trading civilization for some period of several centuries. Apparently, Poverty Point seemed to be the focus of this major trade network, again, up and down the Mississippi River Valley. Probably because of I'm not sure if it's just because of location or because of large population. I guess I don't know if it's